They say life softens after 50. That it's the season of calm, of slowing the pace. But nobody warns you about the sparks of emotion that arrive uninvited. The small jolts that stir you awake when you thought you'd already settled into peace. It unfolded one summer weekend. The kind that drifts in quietly yet leaves behind a shadow you can't quite name, but also can't forget. I was 52 then. Divorced, self-reliant, and certain I had already lived through the surprises life had to offer. I wasn't unhappy. My days were steady, my home quiet, my garden thriving. That Friday began like all the others until a message came from Rachel, my oldest friend. Her father had fallen ill in Tallahassee, and she needed to leave suddenly. "Would you mind if Alex stayed with you for a couple of days?" she asked. "I don't want him alone, and you're right nearby." Alex, her son. 17, almost 18. I hadn't seen much of him lately, though I remembered the boy who once tore through my backyard in sneakers stained with grass. I agreed without hesitation. When he arrived, the change startled me. Taller now, broader, carrying himself with a quiet ease so different from the clumsy boy I recalled. His voice had deepened, his eyes steady yet searching. "Thanks for letting me stay, Miss Garrett," he said, a polite smile tugging at his lips. "Diane," I corrected softly, laughing. "You're not 12 anymore." He smiled again, and for a fleeting second, something in it lingered. I brushed it aside. That evening we cooked spaghetti and put on an action film. I barely followed the story, but Alex was absorbed, face lit by the screen. Our talk stayed simple: school, plans after graduation. He spoke of trade school, maybe working with his uncle in Colorado. He sounded thoughtful, grounded, far more mature than I expected. Later, I carried him some towels and found him on the back deck, watching fireflies dance in the heavy night air. I stepped beside him. "You okay?" he asked. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes I wish I could stop time. Just hit pause." His voice wasn't dramatic, just honest. I looked out over the still yard. "More often than I admit," I answered. We stayed there quietly, listening to the dark. Something shifted in me then. Not desire, not exactly, but a reminder of what it felt like to be noticed. Not for what I'd endured or for what I did each day, but simply for existing. The next day grew hotter. We cleaned out boxes in the garage, music playing. To my surprise, Alex knew every lyric to Fleetwood Mac. We laughed at that, and for the first time in years, I felt a lightness rising in my chest. By afternoon I suggested a swim. I hadn't worn that old one-piece in ages and pulled it on with more hesitation than I cared to admit. When I stepped outside, Alex was already in the pool, face tilted toward the sun. "Come in," he said, eyes still closed. The water was warm, the sky sharp blue. We splashed, playful, laughing. Mid-laugh he said, "You don't smile much." I blinked. "I do." He shook his head gently. "You pretend to. But when it's real, it changes your whole face." That stayed with me, the way he noticed, the way he said it. That night I lay awake, hearing his voice repeat in the dark. I told myself it was nothing, just kindness, and that I wasn't used to kindness anymore. But the next morning when I heard his footsteps on the stairs, I felt it again, that flutter. He walked in, hair messy, still half asleep. "You're up early," I said. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured, stretching. I offered to make breakfast. When I slid a plate toward him, his fingers brushed mine. Just a touch, yet it landed deeply. He watched me cook as though it mattered. And when he said, "You make this house feel safe," my breath caught. Later that day, a summer storm rolled through. We sat on the couch flipping through an old album. He pointed at a photo of my daughter at 7. "She has your eyes," he said. "She's braver than I ever was," I whispered. "You don't give yourself enough credit," he replied, glancing at me sideways. The couch felt smaller, the air heavier. He reached for my hand lightly. Not bold, not inappropriate, just connection. "You don't have to be afraid with me," he said softly. I stood then, not to run but because the weight of the moment was too much. Matey. Tried to steady myself. That night the house was quiet, but I felt the shift. I felt it in the silence, in the way his voice wouldn't leave my mind. The next day returned to routine. Groceries, chores, but everything felt more vivid, alive. That evening we sat again, watching a slow, poetic film. At one point he reached for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. "I don't want us to pretend this didn't happen," he said later. "We haven't done anything," I answered quickly. "But we have," he whispered. "Even if it's only this. Whatever this is." I looked at him. Young, yes, but gentle, kind, and truly seeing me. "I don't know what it means," I admitted. "Maybe it doesn't need to mean anything," he said quietly. "Maybe it just needs to be real." The next morning Rachel returned, unaware. When Alex left, I stood on the porch. He looked back once, only once, but that glance stayed with me. Later, as I sipped tea in my empty house, I realized the weekend hadn't been about romance or scandal. Had been about awakening. We don't always choose who makes us feel seen. Sometimes it's unexpected. Sometimes it's brief. But even a single moment can echo through the rest of your life.